Hey everyone, this space will be recorded. We're just getting everyone on, so I'm just giving a few seconds for everyone to get on. Just hold tight and we'll get this thing started. Okay, everyone, welcome to the first official voice AMA with Fortress DAO. I'll be speaking with one of the backend devs, Avraham, and we'll be focusing on questions relating to his work and involvement with the project. Welcome, Abraham. How you going?
Hi, I'm going good.
Awesome. One of the first questions I wanted to ask was relating to your background, where you came from, and what led you into working with Fortress DAO and eventually the stablecoin project that's going to be complementary.
So I used to be in e-commerce for a number of years. Um, about a year ago, I started getting into crypto investing. I used to look at different DeFi stuff, yield farming, NFTs. Um, Basically, just a wide array of different interactions with crypto. And then about 2 months ago, some of the people that I had met in different discords and different communities as part in crypto were invited me to help them with the launching the Fortress project, and then we built that, and here we are.
Great. So there's a few questions relating to Fortress DAO and some of the the decision you guys made regarding to not having dynamic bonds or removing some of the liquidity. Do you reckon you could address some of the past concerns from the community, just so I guess we can clear that out of the way, because there's been a lot of reason, like people concerned with you guys making these decisions without making proposals for the community first,
Yeah. So there's
specifically with the liquidity.
Okay, so regarding liquidity, every DAO that's every similar project has what's called a backing price, um, which effectively is just mathematically you take the value of the treasury and you divide that by the number of tokens, and then that's displayed as the backing price per token. Um, and that changes over time as the treasury grows and as more tokens are issued. But the key thing to understand is that when the treasury treasury the protocol owns its own liquidity. So we had, I believe at the time, about $3 million worth of liquidity for Fortress, for Fort. And the way that worked is anyone can buy or sell Fort. And when they do that on Trader Joe, which is where the liquidity was based, they're effectively buying it from the protocol, from the community, that from the treasury. And so when Fort was at a healthy price, this was all fine. The issue was at some point Fort dropped below the backing price, and it's still there as today. Now, when that happens, the treasury was effectively offering to sell anyone for it for significantly below the backing. And doing that meant that it would get diluted if somebody would come along and we had millions of dollars in liquidity of an offer to sell below backing. And we discussed it and ultimately decided that as the primary market maker for Ford, we did not want to enable um, so many buys at that price, and we came to the decision to remove the liquidity at that point and until we were able to stabilize around or above backing.
So if a whale was to come in and manipulate the price under, they could basically get a bunch of thought under backing, and
So
that
I don't
would.
want to use the term manipulation. Uh, I know that there were other DAOs as well that went below backing. I've talked to people that bought a lot of Snowbank, for example, under backing, and for them, it's basically like buying a company or buying a fund where they have more assets in the company than you're paying. And uh, so it's one thing to say, okay, people can go to the open market and do whatever they want, which is fine. But we are the market. We provided the liquidity. And so you're saying why should we, as the protocol, be selling people Fort below the backing value? And it just didn't make sense. And we left some liquidity in because we want to enable some trading, but we believe the majority of it should only be added back after it stabilizes at or around backing or higher.
All right, great. I think that pretty much answers that question. Um, a lot of people are wondering about the stablecoin project, and I guess I want to run through a few things relating to it. First of all, like a concern a few community members have been having is essentially like how is it going to benefit for in general, and like with DAOs, I believe that you can't just be just a rebase token. I feel like you need to add value. So I'm assuming with the stable coin project, it's going to add more treasury and float and obviously more sustainability. But I guess you can explain exactly how it's going to benefit for.
Okay, so I want to be careful not to make any commitments or promises about yield or specific numbers. And certainly the exact mechanics of the stablecoin haven't been released most of it, but you'll see how it actually works once we actually launch. Um, so I do need to add that disclaimer. In general, in theory, if we create a stablecoin that pays yield, and the treasury ultimately has significant funds in this stable, then the treasury will grow over time as the yield grows, and then that ultimately would increase the backing per token. Now, how big that is depends on the yield, and also depends on if the treasury organically grows from, for example, bonding or other factors. Aside from this, and then at the same time, you do have more tokens issued on a regular basis that reduces the backing. So this doesn't necessarily increase you have to put all those different factors together to see how the actual backing will respond to that. But in theory, if a stablecoin project grows and there's significant yield, then that will tend to increase the amount of backing and the treasury size compared to the alternative. That makes sense.
Yep, no, that makes perfect sense. So essentially, the protocol will use FUSD as a way to grow the treasury, and the FUSD stablecoin project will be using various yield strategies to grow the treasury. Is this going to be another way of, is this going to be the only way the treasury of Fortress DAO is going to be growing the treasury, or are we still going to be using the treasury for other things?
Well, there are, in general, with these projects, two ways to grow the treasury. One is to have the assets that the treasury invests in grow in value, um, and the other is through new bonding. Now, most projects will not do bonding below the backing price, which is why we have not had backing bonding recently. So I mean, that's for the same reason as we turned off most of the liquidity, because if there's if you have a treasury that there's at whatever value, something like $25. And you can look up the exact number on the dashboard and do the math. Whatever value backing per token, and then if we're going to tell people, oh, but you could buy a bond for the token at $20, which doesn't make sense. It dilutes further than we should be diluting. So that's why right now we have bonding at or above backing. And while the price is below, the bonding is strongly negative, as people have noticed, but there really isn't anything we can do on that until the price goes up, and then we can encourage back bonding again. And the bonding increases the treasury, because the money that gets bonded goes into the treasury, and then that ultimately increases backing per token if it's done properly.
Another question with the development of the stablecoin is the funds you initially got with Fortress DAO. How do you justify adding another 75,000 USD to work on the stablecoin project as well?
So the initial funds ultimately there's, I believe, 3 people that are working on the stablecoin, and we anticipate more work to be part of that before we actually launch, and then we have 25,000 that's set aside for any other expenses that come up. I do think that it was a roughly fair price for what the standard is in crypto, for a project of this size and this timeline to release. But you'll see once it actually releases. Yeah.
No, that makes sense. So basically, it's a fair price for the development that you guys are currently undertaking. And as we all know, devs are expensive. Another question that I wanted to get into is specifically, people want to know more about the stablecoin project and how exactly
Sure.
it works and why you guys are making it as well.
So you just want to get my broad vision for the project?
Yeah, so maybe start with the broad vision and then I'll ask more specific questions.
So basically, I think of it as a hybrid of the centralized lenders, which are Nexo and Celsius and so on, and the stable coins that are on chain. And you look at USDC, USDT, and if you give them money, they're making yields in the background, but they don't give any of that back to you. And you just you give money to Coinbase, and they give you USDC, and they're putting that money somewhere and they're making a return. And you get to use that in DeFi protocols and do whatever and trade and anything, but you don't get any of that return back. So in one sense, it would be competition, because it would be a token. The staked version of the token is transferable. You can bridge it. You can trade with it. But it also gives you more yield and increases in value over time. While now, on the other side, there are lending platforms, like I mentioned, Nexo and Celsius, where they will give you yield on your assets, but it's stuck by them. The advantage of the FUSD concept is that you would have a claimable token on chain that you can use to represent this yield bearing asset. And so it's kind of it's better than it should be better than both of those. As you get the yield, but you also get the having the token on chain to use. And eventually, potentially we could get added to lending platforms, and then you could imagine if you could put up your staked FUSD on something like Ava, and then borrow against that, and then lever up the yield, which is very similar to what platforms like Abracadabra and MIM are doing. But again, that's going to take a while to build out, and you need partnerships and everything. But we're definitely looking forward to seeing what we can build and what others can build on top of this once we launch.
So, like MIM, they are backed by usually yield-bearing tokens. What you're proposing is you back the FUSD with stable coins, and then you turn that into yield, and then pay back the people that have converted into FUSD and have staked it, and they get the SFUSD back, like staked FUSD. Is that right?
Yeah, what was the last part they're getting back? I'm not sure about the specifics there.
So when you stake your FUSD, you get staked FUSD back as a token representing that you're getting yield. So it's like MIM, but sort of reverse in a way where you're, instead of it being backed by yield bearing tokens, it's just it's backed by stable coins. Is that correct?
Yeah, you have a SFUSD that would be backed by FUSD, which is ultimately backed by the underlying stables or whatever the assets are.
So with you guys creating the stablecoin project, are you guys going to be changing the liquidity with MIM and moving some of it to FUSD and fort pairings, or how are you guys?
I believe that, well, first of all, we would have some liquidity between FUSD and MIM, presumably on either Curve or one of the Curve competitors. On Avalanche, we'll have to see about partnership opportunities there. And then separately, we will probably shift the Fort liquidity over to Fort FUSD, as opposed to MIM. And then the biggest liquidity pool for Fort should be the one between that and FUSD. And so all the existing trading should then move over. With that's and then, well, it depends on whether bonding becomes positive, whether the token goes above backing price. We're still waiting for, but we also plan to add FUSD bonding options, and potentially FUSD liquidity bonding. But that just right now we don't have any bonding, any positive bonding. So we're waiting for that to be valuable.
Yeah. So can you run through like how someone would get involved with the stablecoin project? Say like you hear about it, what exactly would they need to do? And like, could you maybe explain like the process of creating FUSD maybe, and give people an idea of what exactly like how it all works?
So again, it's not launched yet. Once we launch, we would have a website that you could mint FUSD on, and you would also be able to buy FUSD through the liquidity pools on wherever we end up launching liquidity there.
And basically, the idea is that the way you're going to incentivize people to mint FUSD is by the yield generation that you're potentially creating, thus growing FUSD. Will there be any fees relating to using the protocol, and will that benefit the Fort Treasury?
Yeah. It hasn't been set exactly. We anticipate having minor mint and redemption fees to avoid people just hopping in for the yield and then leaving. But The treasury will be exempt from those fees. Um, and but yeah, there will be. My guess is it'll be either 10 basis points or 20 basis points fees on minting and redemption, which is roughly in line with other stable fees, but uh, uh, that may vary.
Can you,
So,
for some people that don't really understand what minting and redeeming fees are related to, could you, explain that for someone that doesn't understand?
so basically, let's say you have $1,000, a thousand MIM, and you want to get FUSD. Then you would mint, and it might take, let's say, a $1 fee in that case if it's 10 basis points, and then you would put out 1,000 MIM, but you would get 999 FUSD, and then you might have a similar fee on redemption. And the main reason for that would be to avoid people coming in with a lot of money right before the yield gets paid out and then leaving immediately. Um, so as to
So,
encourage longer holding periods.
so it's basically similar to like a warm up or a cool down period that some DAOs have been implementing, and so people can't rebase jump.
Yeah, well, separately we'll have a little bit of a we'll have an unstaking period that when you unstake, it takes a bit of time to get the money out. From S4 from SFUSD, but also relatively minor fees, but that just prevent it from being gained too much.
Would there be any plans of having a liquidity pair with SFUSD?
As of now, we intend to just do a FUSD here, just because throwing a rebase token inside a liquidity is you need the smart contract to support it, and so we need to make sure that that whatever contracts we're using don't get screwed up by having a rebase.
Oh, okay, so there's some smart contract um, problems there. No, that makes sense. Relating to Fortress DAO, what and the stablecoin project, just could you maybe give the community just like an overall like vision of where you potentially, in theory, see this all going?
Um, my goal is to grow the stablecoin as much as I can, and I'm hoping to attract a lot of capital towards that. Um, and ultimately, if I am if we are able to run the stablecoin float effectively, then that should lead to um, growing the treasury and growing the backing and for a fortress.
Yeah. So essentially, if the stablecoin project is successful, it will definitely benefit the ecosystem, which is Fortress DAO as well. Along with the stablecoin project, do you foresee any other ecosystems that are going to be like any other project ecosystems that you'd add on to Fortress DAO, or
We've
is
been
this,
flo- we've been floating the idea of trying to launch other uh, differently structured coins. So, for example, there's a lot of people have been talking about having tomb forks, um, and those have apparently been pretty popular recently. But we don't have any firm proposals or ideas. We're going to wait until once we finish launching this. Um, I'm so definitely can't commit or like even say that anything is particularly likely, or it's definitely not a roadmap or anything. But we've been looking at the potential for just doing a bunch of spin-off forks of different projects and then having them tied back to the treasury in some way. Um,
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Another question I had from some of the community members, people are wondering how the current team structure, how many members and roles and what the backgrounds are. If you can, obviously some don't want to be doxed, but maybe just run the numbers of who's involved with the project, as in like what their roles are.
Well, I'm the lead backend. Peach is the founder and brought us all together. And they do some front end and some tokenomics and just general stuff. Um, the core team right now is just Peach, myself, Imago, and Psycut. And they're both in more general, mostly front end, and some scripts and so on.
Yeah,
And then we had a few other team members that helped us build it out that uh, as are not as involved anymore. Um,
and you've recently hired the Zybumi, I believe, as the community manager.
yes.
Yeah. I'm just gonna quickly run through if there's any more relevant questions. Um, so with the liquidity, until we get back above backing with the stable price, is that likely when you'll be adding it back? Just so we can clarify that with the community.
Yeah. Once we see it stabilized at or above backing, and there may be buybacks along the way. As the community knows, we have been doing some buybacks. It's just very hard to commit to specific numbers or specific levels, just because if you give too much information about the buyback plan, you'll get front run and you'll get worse prices and they'll lose value. Um, as we've seen with other projects that have done buybacks. But uh, I mean, we do think it's going. We do hope it will get to backing, and hope to be able to add back the liquidity and also have liquidity bonding at backing, and increase the liquidity that way as well.
Yeah. So with the backing going above, like when we get above backing price, will the bonds be dynamic?
Yeah, so we have the scripts to have the bond dynamic, just that it's been negative for a while, so it just doesn't help. But um, we will have dynamic bonding once we're in a position to have bonding again.
And with the stablecoin project, will there be FUSD minting? I mean, yeah, minting into the bonds instead of MIM, or will there be both?
We anticipate once bonding is positive that we would replace the MIM minting with FUSD. We could keep both around maybe for some period of time. Uh, I would anticipate most of them moving over to FUSD, but you would be able to easily convert between them. So it shouldn't be that big a deal which one it is.
Will there be any other bonding with the Avalanche ecosystem? So, for example, like, will you encourage more AVAX bonding or other tokens on the network?
Yeah, we decided that it just shouldn't be. We don't want to incentivize risky assets. Um, we want we want to position the DAO as the bear market DAO, where we won't lose a lot of value if the market crashes. So we don't want to hold a large amounts of the treasury in AVAX. Um, and you see some of the other treasuries like Time like converted all their AVAX away to stables. And So we just don't want to have that exposure at this point.
So in the early stages and also during the growth, the idea is that having a bunch of stable coins backing the Fortress DAO, and then along with creating the stable yield, will there be other potential? So just to get an idea, will the yield strategies be based around just using Curve, or could you maybe run through some of the plans on how exactly you're going to be creating yield so people can like get an idea of where this money is potentially going? You don't have to go in too much specifics, just some strategies that you've have thought about that you can implement.
Yeah, well, some of it could be the traditional yield farming on Curve and MIM and so on. And then we're going to presumably layer more complex strategies on top of that. And we can also do cross-chain and off-chain strategies. And I'm really going to be focused on diversifying the money that ends up inside the stable coin into try to get really diversified sources of yield and try to keep it all safe.
So when you say off-chain, are you referring to like traditional investment strategies? What do you mean by off-chain exactly?
Not necessarily traditional, but things like exchange arbitrages or collecting funding rates or lending. There's a lot of money in those strategies, and we've also been looking at different funds that could potentially manage some portion of the money that's in the stable. Again, it's going to be complicated. We want to properly diversify across many different sources of yield. And really try to be protected against, like I said, we don't want to hold risky assets either in the treasury and certainly not on the stable coin. That's you want to always have enough backing coin. So
Yeah, so for example, like there was a liquidity mining event proposal with Fodl Finance. Some of the people in the community were wondering why that never went through, and
so
maybe
there was a few issues. One of the main issues was that they ended up displaying the APYs incorrectly, and we figured that out. And there were a lot of people complaining in the Discord, and so we didn't feel comfortable going in at that point. And they ended up changing it and re. I think that something like that is just very time dependent, and something that looks like a good idea is not necessarily a good idea a few days later. And so it didn't really work on the time scale that we were doing it. I am always looking for more scalable yield options. And when we launch the stablecoin, I'm going to put out a call for like anybody that has scale that is good at scaling yield opportunities to come work with us. We'll be actively hiring and trying to build out. So if you're familiar with Yearn, they have a whole ecosystem of people that write strategies for them and get some portion of the yield that their strategies can produce. And I think I want to build out something similar inside this structure where you'll have community members that can this and get some portion of that.
So basically, you're kind of like Yearn.finance in a way where you're a yield aggregator, where you're going to be parking a bunch of these stable assets into a bunch of different places, but more focusing on less risky and more safer but higher yield strategies when they pop up. Like, because what you're saying with FODL finance, if it was, if you're effectively taking advantage of it as it shows up, then those yield strategies can, boost the overall percentage over time because it's somewhat time sensitive. But then you're also going to be diversifying the protocol of assets just to be constantly generating yield all over the place as well. Is that sort of what the plan is?
Yeah, I mean, we want to be really active. We want to grow it to a very large float. I mean, you look at some of these places, and Celsius, the ones I mentioned, Celsius and Exo, and they have billions of dollars under management. So I think that we bootstrap with Fortress, um, and then we launch and we prove out the yield, and we show that we can achieve that. And if we're competitive with those platforms, then there's no reason over time we can't go to similar levels.
So when we're talking about like, growing the float,
Yeah.
like, are there any concerns of like scaling out the amount of money that you're going to be dealing with?
So I've been running similar amounts for the last while. I think that it certainly gets much harder to raise to allocate capital the more you're working with, but at the levels that we're talking about, I don't think it's so much of an issue yet. But I'm also getting much more active, looking out for more opportunities and trying to hire people and build out more strategies than like I've been saying, we want to diversify across many sources of yield, and that's how you're able to deploy when you're trying to deploy tens of millions of dollars. You need to be much more active and do more work. So I'm in the process of building out a proper team to do that.
So basically, the idea is that you're going to have people helping you find investment strategies. So, many hands make light work, and you can also capitalize on finding unique opportunities when you have a lot of people looking for it. Is that sort of like what the team is going to be doing?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, you have all these different aggregators and centralized lenders and yield farms that then they have billions of dollars in them, and we think that I mean, my initial goal. I mean, we're going to start off with 8 figures and then try to scale to 9, and then over time I think we could go bigger, but it all depends on the market conditions, what kind of yield we end up returning, and if we can actually deploy so much. We want to. You don't want to scale too quickly from day one. So this is I look at this as a long-term project. That's what I've been putting most of my effort recently into lining up the yield opportunities into getting the stablecoin properly set up. So you have the right structure, you have the right backing and everything.
So in terms of the smart contract behind the stablecoin project, is it a fairly it's basically like a um, just like a simple staking contract, or how
Yeah,
exactly?
I mean, very simple. You create you mint, you redeem, you can stake, you unstake, and then you have all the usual ERC-20 stuff, transfer and everything. Um, there's not going to be any fancy codes there. Fancy stuff all comes in the back end.
And would the stablecoin project have a multi-sig, or how will How will we know that the funds are protected?
I don't know about the multi-sig upfront. Presumably it'll be owned by some. I have to see who exactly is going to be on. Yeah, I would assume that the contracts will all get. Well, you might not even have an owner of the. Yeah, we'll see when we have the final implementation. Which stuff exactly needs to be owned and which stuff is just a contract that's out there and so on. I can't really speak to the technical details of that until it's fully implemented.
Yeah. So how far out are we looking to seeing the stablecoin project up and running?
We're still hoping to launch like next week or the same 2-week timeline from the proposal.
And that will essentially be completely up and running. Everyone can just start minting the FUSD, essentially. Is that right? Or will only be initially with the treasury funds, and then later on people will be able to mint?
It would be open to minting to everyone immediately upon launch.
All right, cool. I we are about 45 minutes through. Are you happy on taking some community questions just before we wrap
Sure,
up for the hour? All
sure.
right. So if there's anyone in the Twitter space right now that has a question relating to the project, um, feel free to put your hand up, and I'll add you up. I will make a disclaimer though. If you you know, we need to be respectful to the people on the stage. So any abuse or anything of that nature, you'll be kicked off. Let's keep it civil and respect the development team. Any questions? I will ask with there's been issues with the rebase um, hoppers. Do you feel like there's anything we can currently do to battle that issue with DAO projects? Specifically, some people have been doing warm-up periods. Some people are changing the rebase time. Is there anything that you could speak to about that and what you could potentially be doing?
I think that there may have been an issue earlier with the higher rebase. Right now, the rebase is like a little over 0.5%. And so it's kind of negated by the 0.25% fee that you have to pay twice if you jump in and out. So I don't believe it's currently a concern. We could definitely potentially take a look if the APY goes higher, if there's a period of aggressive bonding, which leads to higher APY. Um, and see. I just remember even earlier. I don't think it was that big a deal for Fortress. But if anyone has some kind of analysis that they can show me that there's bots that are really doing that, they're causing issues, I can take a look at that. I from what I've seen so far, it has not really been an issue for Fortress.
When we do get into positive bonding, do you feel like there's any need for uh, auto staking? So the term 4-4.
Yeah. We've looked at that. We have to see. I mean, you need to deploy new bonds for that. So maybe when we do the FUSD bond, we can look into that kind of bonding. I don't want to commit to anything uh, before we actually put it onto a roadmap and do it, but definitely potential there.
So because with these rebase tokens, we got Wonderland talking about being, you know, a DAO to grow the funds and make a game. We've got Olympus adding bonds as a service and going multi-chain. And then we've just got other OM forks that are just utilizing different APY strategies. And, you know, there's a lot of different ideas and strategies that are going into DAOs that are unique. What do you feel you think that Fortress DAO's value add is as a DAO, and where do you think we fit in the market overall compared to these other ones? Do you feel like we're competitors, or do you think there's enough market share for Fortress DAO to be within the ecosystem?
I mean, everyone's competitors, but there's also it's a big ecosystem. I think right now the main differentiator is the stablecoin that's going to be launched, and that's going to enable treasury growth. And I actually wanted to talk about something I floated in the Discord earlier, which is this is definitely not a finalized what's it called? Definitely not something that we're planning on doing or going to do. But we were thinking about putting bonding back just about at backing or slightly higher. And again, potentially using I didn't put this in the Discord. We were discussing privately. We were thinking of using bonding at backing to effectively leverage the treasury. It's a bit of a basically we have, let's say, right now 14 million in the treasury. Now imagine that we launch FUSD and you move some portion of that over to FUSD, and then you open up bonding just at or just below backing, and then you have FUSD use their assets to buy into the bonding into the treasury, which now increases the treasury, and then the treasury uses that to buy FUSD. It's a bit of a complicated concept. I need to really game it out and publish something. But we have been it's just an idea that got floated a bit earlier.
So you
Of
essentially
some kind of loop.
like a leverage loop strategy to because it's your own assets, you could
Yeah.
basically leverage the stable coins and grow the treasury that way with the FUSD. Is that right?
Yeah, you would create bonds and you would create and if you do it at backing, then there is no real risk for either side. But you end up showing a much higher treasury value and a much higher float. I would have to explain the idea in more detail. But this is very similar to some of the leverage stuff that MIM is doing, where they issue their own token and they use that to buy other tokens and use that to issue their own token in the loop. So
Yeah, that makes sense. Basically, leveraging your own stablecoin assets and growing the treasury that way. That way, you control that MIM, so it's like it's not going anywhere. It makes total sense to me. With the launch of the stablecoin project, a lot of people, have been asking when marketing, and I know that you're the back end dev and you don't necessarily deal with this. Are you aware of the marketing being set up for the launch of the stablecoin project? Because obviously, marketing that we're a DAO is one thing, but telling people that we've got some value add is a whole nother thing. And I feel like we need to differentiate ourselves from other forks by showing what we're actually doing. Is there plans essentially to market this stablecoin launch? Because a lot of people have been curious. We have made a proposal for 150,000 US to market Fortress DAO, and we're just wondering when that's going to take place, and if you have any details regarding that.
yeah, I just have not been involved with the marketing. I know there have been internal proposals to spend different amounts on different YouTubers and so on. I just basically approved of the spend, but it's just not my I'm just not in charge of that spend, so I don't really I can't speak to the marketing, unfortunately.
No, I guess that's fair enough. So you have seen things being approved, so that's good. That's a good sign at least. We do have one person requesting to jump up, so I'm just going to add them now. We have around 10 minutes left, so hopefully we can get a couple more people up. Once one person comes up, usually more people want it. I've just added you, Adrian. Hey, how you going?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for taking the time here today, guys. Really appreciate it. I have a question regarding just some thoughts with the staking. Would it be feasible or possible or beneficial to create some form of staking with a time lock to, add potentially some stability? Because some people, they can unstake and sell immediately. Would it be an idea to propose an additional staking pool with high rewards for a longer lockup time? So like higher yield, longer lockup, potentially a penalty for unstaking early, things like that. I'm just curious if that's ever been something that we can discuss and think about.
Yeah, we haven't specifically thought about that concept. If you want to put together a proposal or something, I'll put that in the suggestions channel. I'd be glad to take a look. And just tag me there. And see the specifics. We're not really going to prioritize things like that until the stablecoin is launched. But we can definitely look up playing around with different parameters and things like that afterwards.
Cool. Any other questions, Adrian, that you might have?
Thank you. My primary question was regarding marketing, but as discussed, he's more the back end. But yeah, it'd be nice to know about how we would create a larger group on Discord, Telegram, just kind of build our build our community. Any strategies or tactics, contests, giveaways, a lot of strategies that have been effective in other communities. Just wondering if we could implement some proven strategies as well.
I'm not sure if you're involved in the Discord, but we have some guilds, and what the guilds essentially do is that they focus on involving the community members in doing specific tasks. And when you do those specific tasks, you get a role. And then essentially, what we're planning on doing is that those that are contributing to these goals, such as if you're memeing and you're making really cool memes, or if you're helping with suggestions and proposals, or you're spreading lots of tweets out and you're inviting people, you'll get a unique role, and then through that you can get rewarded in Fortress tokens. But that's still being the initial stages are being set up. The guilds are there. People are just working out and getting their roles being approved, and then from there we can start rewarding community members and users, just to give community members some incentive to essentially earn some rewards. That's one of the ways that we're actively involving the community. I know we have a marketing guy named Whale Club that's been doing several things, like getting on DeFi Llama, getting the right amount of data on things like CoinGecko, like all these little things that you don't think of. With his connections, he's been able to connect Fortress DAO up quite quickly, so we can get noticed, so we can get the market cap up, so people can see us on those platforms. They're all little, that you may not see that as marketing, but they're all little steps that get the name out there subtly, but which didn't even be paid for. They're all just with these connections. But I do know, with the marketing, Whale Club has been connecting with a bunch of different avenues to get that word out. It's just Peach Pie, just so everyone else is aware, Peach Pie has made some comments about, I think timing the marketing is also important. When we just had this big slump in the market, a lot of people are risk off, and when people are risk off, if you market and you get the word out, a lot of, you basically like, people have the memory of a goldfish. Like, no offense to people, but like with the space of the crypto market, there's so much stuff being thrown at your face constantly. Like, it's hard to keep up. So when things start, to turn around and get more bullish, and when we have the, things to talk about, like the stablecoin project, I believe that the team are going to time the marketing more effectively, if that makes sense.
Thanks for the information. That was great. Maybe another question. How would the stablecoin create a durable competitive advantage for Fortress?
Yeah, so, well, the goal is that the stablecoin grows, and once we have a large float under management, then we could effectively provide much better yield strategies at scale, and then some of that ultimately flows back to the treasury. And also, the treasury would so eventually, and this is all assuming that the coin takes off and so on, but the treasury would be the primary liquidity provider for the stable coin, and so it would accrue the fees and so on if it gets actively used. And there the other, so you get a few different ways for value to accrue to the treasury, and if this takes off.
Where would the fees be coming from? Like, for example, if people are using the stablecoin, like for example, we use MIM. Are there fees going to the MIM holders? Like, how is that comparable? The two, like, how's this stablecoin going to function essentially, and how will the fees be accrued to the treasury?
Well, okay, so there's one is the yield that comes just from the treasury holding the staked SFUSD, and then separately, if the treasury holds the liquidity in the token, then that's going to be, let's say, on Curve, then and then the token starts having a lot of transfer volume, of trade volume, then the fees on that all go back to the treasury, and we can scale up, and then we would use the we would get bonding for that liquidity peer and for FUSD, and the goal would be to sell a lot of bonds denominated in this coin, and then grow the treasury that way.
Excellent, thank you. We need to create a little YouTube tutorial for newcomers. I think some of it might fly over a lot of people's heads, but amazing.
Yeah, there's a lot of moving pieces here. It'll hopefully be clearer once it actually launches and can actually do stuff with it.
Excellent, thanks a lot.
You. Is there do you have any other questions?
Yeah, I'm just getting one or two more people up. Thank you, Adrian. If you wanted to step down, if you've got no more questions. I've got Sir here. Hey, Sir, how you going?
Hi, thanks for the opportunity. I had a question I wanted to ask. How does the future of the APY look like?
The Fortress APY?
Yeah.
Right now it's about 44,000. I'm pulling it up now, and it's oh, we went up a bit, about 67,000 now.
Yeah, like it was
Not actually
tenfold
sure.
of what it was now, but I'm curious to hear what the future of the APY looks like this year. Are you planning on keeping it stable? Are you planning on? Yeah, I'm curious to hear.
Well, what we need for the goal ultimately is to grow the treasury and to get the coin up. Now, I can't promise anything. Ultimately, the way that you get really high APYs is from having a lot of bonding, and then basically the bonding what the staking rewards that would normally go to the bonds tokens end up going to the people that are staking instead, and so that increases the APY compared to if there was no bonding. Separately, we could increase or decrease the reward rate, which directly affects the APY. We have not made any changes to the reward rate so far, and we don't think that it really makes sense to change that while we're in this sort of static mode where we're trading under backing. But we could. We've been talking about potential. We've been talking about potential changes to the APY. And if we want to do anything there, we would put a proposal and see what people are interested in, what people think. Right now, there's no definitive plan.
Yeah. Do you think APY just above, just under 100K will be sustainable?
So right now there's something like 170 days runway. So that means that it's sustainable at least for that period of time. And then, so that's like if the price didn't change and if the liquidity didn't change and the APY didn't change, then that's the limit on the current treasury. But if those things change, then that runway could go up or down. So right now that's sustainable. If we grow, we could definitely sustain higher APYs. If we don't, we might have to drop the APY at some point.
Yeah, I definitely do be comfortable with 10 APY at least. Of course, 12, 13 will be a delight, but depends on the possibilities and your team and tokenomics and
yeah.
But thank you for the opportunity to ask.
Thank you for your question.
I'm just adding one more person up right now. I'm just waiting for them to accept the request. Yep, we got Escarlata. Hey, how you going? I think they're muted. You gotta unmute at the bottom left.
Hi there. First off, I would like to congratulate Abraham and all the team because of all their effort they're putting into the project. And now the question will be, I don't know if it's discussed already, but did you consider a wrappable version of the Fortress token?
You mean buybacks?
Like a wrap version of the token, like a wrap demo.
Oh.
Do you
I have a bad echo here.
Escarlata. Can you mute? I want to speak.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Did you consider doing a wrapped version of the Fortress token?
Can you mute him? Oh. So yeah, the wrapped version has come up a few times. Right now it's not a priority. We felt that the bigger priority was launching the stable, and can maybe do that down the line. Yeah.
When do you expect announcement of the roadmap?
Well, we don't really work that way. Like we decided we're going to do the stable coin. We put out a proposal and we have a deadline for that. But I don't have specific roadmap items for after that. We have ideas and things to do. I think initially we had a longer roadmap and then we decided to go. Just some of those things didn't make sense to do, and so we don't really have a roadmap for now. And we have different proposals that are out there that are going to get implemented, but so it's how it's working.
Okay. I don't know if you covered it already, but when or in what way are you expecting to re-add the liquidity?
Basically, once we stabilize at or around backing, then we can start slowly adding it in. We don't want us to add a lot of liquidity below backing and have people buy it up, and then you have some like one whale that got control of a large amount of the float below backing and can control the project. That's what we're really trying to avoid with that system.
Okay. My last question: do you have anything to tell on the NFTs, maybe?
I have not been involved with the NFT side of Fortress, so I really, unfortunately, I don't have an answer for that. Sorry.
I have a question with regard to the time frame, timeline approximation for completion of like your first major goal of the stablecoin. That's your primary priority, and any idea how long that'll take to complete?
Our goal is still about a week and a half from now, to get it launched. At least a beta version that should be usable and you can mint and redeem and everything.
And where can people get the stablecoin? Would it be through the Fortress? Will it be through an exchange like a DEX?
We would make it. Yeah, we would make our own site that you could interact with. And there will probably also be liquidity on one of the exchanges, but that's not determined yet.
Thanks. So just to clarify with the roadmap, the roadmap is non-specific. There's ideas that you guys are working through, specifically the stablecoin project, but as things change, you don't want to add things to the roadmap that don't become viable later on. And I'm assuming that's why there's no hard roadmap right now.
Yeah, we think that the stablecoin launch will do well, and then we'll see from there if we want to spend time building out other projects, if we want to focus just on that. That's depends how well that goes, honestly.
All right, cool. I think we're over an hour now, and I believe that we've got a good understanding of the stablecoin project, at least conceptually. Once it does get released, will there be way, like as people were saying, Adrian was mentioning, like some way of like learning how to use the protocol? Like, will there be like some sort of tutorial, or will it be really simple and basic that it won't be too hard to navigate?
Sorry, I missed.
Just essentially, will using the stablecoin project, minting and redeeming, will there be any tutorials or ways of understanding how this is going to work?
I'll probably just put out some basic docs. I don't have specific plans, but I'm sure that we can get YouTube and whatever if it's too complicated. And I'm sure the community can help if. But yeah, the minting and redemption is going to be very simple, so I'm not worried about that.
Okay, cool. So the process isn't going to be too complicated.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone, for listening into the first AMA. This is more of the back-end dev side AMA because we don't have Peach Pie here today. There's a few questions that couldn't essentially be answered because of that. I hope everyone got value out of this AMA, and we'll be looking forward to making some more in the future and developing out more connections with the community so people can keep in the loop of what's happening with Fortress DAO. The best place to connect with all the information with Fortress DAO currently is within the Discord. We have a really strong community there, a bunch of people building out stuff. Like I mentioned earlier with the guilds, you can work out which guild would suit you and what role you could help the community out and contribute that way. But essentially, the stablecoin project is going to be a way for the yield the treasury to work so that we can survive in any bear market conditions. So I would akin the Fortress DAO as a lower, like a more of a safer alternative to these different DAOs out there, because their focus is on low risk, high yield strategies and building out the treasury that way. Thank you everyone for your time, and any last words, Abraham, before we
Yeah, thank you for hosting this, and let's build.
Awesome. I'll see you guys all on the flip side. Take care.
Thank you very much. Take care.